respected elders in the audience, dear brothers and sisters. It's extremely difficult to sit in an audience and you being introduced. But this embarrassing situation we undergo in every meeting. So I always think that before the speaker arrives, he should be introduced, so he is spared from the kind of embarrassment he has to undergo. Because perceptions are formed about a person, and one such perception is that I was an advisor to the previous government. I was not. So most of these profiles are written on the basis of perceptions. I thought of coming to United States after quite a long time. In fact, I used to come here oftener, but after March 2001, I have had no occasion to come here because of my domestic commitments. So when I planned a visit here, it was after extensive discussion with Dr. Manohar Shinde, who had come to India, and we have been interacting on this visit for nearly a year now. And I have come on a contemplative visit, a visit to observe, familiarize myself on issues which are important to people who have assembled here, the Indian community, India, and our civilization. And in a way, it is important to the comity of nations, the world itself. In fact, when I thought of coming to the US, one of the first aspects which I wanted to understand about US was that the US which I saw in March 2001 might not be the same US, because I have been a very keen, distant observer of the United States. Because of its position in geopolitics and its very decisive role and determinative role, this has been one of the countries which has been constantly engaging my attention. So, one of the purposes of the visit was to understand what is the transition that has taken place in this country. And another idea of the visit was to study the transformation which has taken place in the overall positioning, status, profile of the Indian diaspora here, the Indian community. I will come to it a little later as to what exactly was the substance of what I am saying. The third aspect was that there has been a transformation in the profiling of India as a nation. And what is its impact on generally the US and particularly the Indian community here? These were the three main issues that drove me to accept to visit the US. Though it is my personal visit actually, though I am virtually on a conducted tour. If I am asked to get into a car, I am getting into the car. If I am asked to get into the flight, I get into the flight. So that is how I am going around, but these are the three issues. See, as soon as I came into the US, one thing that struck me is that this is a country under tremendous stress. Something all of you being here might not be able to perceive or differentiate in the manner I could do it, because I recollected how free this country was. Nobody bothered about who did what. And the way the immigration counters were nervous. In fact, as soon as I had come, I could not get from my friends the address to which I would go. So I had left it blank. So the officer told me, sir, straight you walk as the arrow directs you, you go at the end and meet somebody. Everybody was going to the baggage collection counter and I was directed to a very different route. Then I went there, an old man, completely nervous. he was writing down another form for me. And he said, you take it and go to that information counter. I went to the information counter. There was a very casual young lady. He said, Mr. Gurumurthy, you have to tell me how and where you are going. I said, I am going to a friend of mine, and unfortunately I have his telephone number, his email address. He is coming to pick me up, but I don't know his address. Because in this country, email address is sufficient, no postal address is needed. He said, I want to know the name of the person. Then I gave the name of the person. But they made the announcement, the person didn't pick up the call. I said, Mr. Gurumurthy, your person hasn't come. You can't go into the country. Then they transferred their nervousness to me. I had to make a phone call and somehow I was able to connect to the person. And then she asked me to get the postal address, fill it, and then I had to pass through the same route. It took 45 minutes. I saw a nation under siege. This is not the America which I visited in March 2001. And this feeling is pervasive. And what I distant observed about America was also inadequate to understand the position in America. When I saw it, it was more real than fictional. So I could see the most powerful nation being under such tremendous stress. And immediately my mind related back to the tenacity of India as a nation. How much troubles we have undergone like the one the US is undergoing today. In fact, someone said, did you see the kind of barbarous attack on the World Trade Center? 2 aeroplanes were inserted on 2 towering buildings. And the whole thing came down, thousands died. That is terror. I said America is now learning UKG and LKG lessons about terror. And we are familiar with it for hundreds of years. In fact, I told one of the commentators who spoke to me about the kind of ferocity that Islamic terror has imposed on this nation. So I told him, in the 13th century there was no television. When I went to Mount Abu, and they said, here is the spot where 35,000 women jumped into fire to save their honor. I realized what would have happened to the world had there been a television to show these 35,000 women being reduced to ashes. Our familiarity with the terror dates back to the days of Lali culture. This nation has been maimed by terror. And the world never realized it. America never realized till it was hit. It never realized what kind of trouble non-conflicting civilizations like India would have faced for hundreds of years. In fact, it was promoting this very terror, financing it, technologically weaponizing it. Even today, the realization is only to the extent of protecting themselves. It is not to the extent it is a common danger to the world. Even today, Pakistan, which houses, protects and promotes what is known as the Devbandi Islam. I don't know how many of us even heard the name of this Islam. Devbandi Islam. It is about 150 kilometers from Delhi. Devbandi is there. That is the Islam which inheres in Pakistan. That is the Islam which inspired Taliban. And that is the institution which gave birth to Al-Qaeda. And Taliban was weaponized by America, technologically equipped by America. And when Taliban turned its energies from Afghanistan after the collapse of communism, and the entire firepower of Taliban was reflected on Kashmir, America was advising us to have a talk with them. Talk to the terror. Young men, they are angry. This was the advice that America kept on giving to India. And my mind went back to all this and recollected how the superpower was unable to understand what this firepower ideology meant to the world, and they have started experiencing it. To that extent, I felt that there has been a proper equation being established by nature. So America will increasingly realize what India has been going through. In fact, even as I was traveling by car to my friend's house, my mind was reflecting on all this. On the second aspect, the Indian diaspora, I find there is a transition in their position. They came as immigrants, as supplicants and applicants for jobs. And they were in search of livelihood. And that mentality had fashioned their psychology. And that psychology had settled their status. And that settled their relationship with the mother society. A sense of inferiority towards the West and the world and towards America. This was the position of the Indian diaspora 10 years back, 15 years back. But there has been a massive transition in that. Today, the world perceives, and even the best minds in America cannot deny, and many of them accept and admit, that Indians in America create wealth not only for themselves, they also create wealth for America and Americans, inside America and outside America. There has been a profile change. There has been a graduation from being mere seekers of job to providers of job. There has been a change in the profile from mere remitters of money to their home country to providing jobs and salaries to the Americans here. But in spite of the fact, this I could see from a distance. This I could see as the assessment and analysis about the Indian diaspora. In my visit I find increasingly this newfound status, this new qualification, this new understanding and perception and profiling of the Indian diaspora is not internalized in the psychology, conduct, status and self-image of the diaspora. Why is it the diaspora has failed to internalize it? Why is it that it has not accepted its newfound status as a matter of pride? It is because the performances are regarded as individual. There is a brand image of an Indian, intelligent, capable, but this entire performance and the credit and the imaging has not gone to the credit of the Indian civilization and the mother society. It is because there is networking, there is no networking amongst us, there is no community effectiveness, and so the incapacity of all of us to leverage on this new status, new profiling, the brand, the net result is the brand that is created is unowned and unleveraged. This is a very perceptible lacuna. And look at back home in India. India was a written-off economy in 1991, 92, 93. And when we founded the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, we were not doing any fun. Many of you may not be aware of the kind of pressure that was exerted on Indian business, Indian businessmen. And there was a time when the officials of Government of India will advise the Indian industrialists that you people have come into manufacturing because of the fact that India was a closed economy and you are not really good in manufacturing. We have been a 300-year expertise in global trade. Rangoon was under our control, Singapore was under our control, Penang was under our control because we were traders. Go back to trading, give up the manufacturing. This was the official advice given by the bureaucrats of the Government of India. I make it bold to name one bureaucrat Montek Singh Ahluwalia used to call industrialists after industrialists and give them this advice. You can understand what would be the position of an economy which was a closed economy till yesterday. Instead of domestically liberalizing it, giving it the calibrating time to prepare itself to face global competition, it was opened for global competition on day one. And on top of it, this is the advice. When the Indian industrialists ran helter-skelter to engage foreign consultants, please tell us the way to go about it. They began advising in the same manner. For instance, the Tata Group was advised to disinvest in Tisco and Telco and to concentrate only on Tata Consultancy Services as the core area. You can understand the pressure on the Indian business. It's undermining India in India. It is devaluing, trivializing Indians in India. And this was supported, promoted by Indian media, Indian intellectuals, Indian political parties. This was defined as globalization, liberalization, releasing the energies of India. If you destroy the confidence of India, where is the energy to be released? That is where we stepped in and began a mighty campaign in the country. And we were besmirched. These are people who want to take the country back to the days of bullock cart. And I was a corporate advisor. The biggest corporates take my advice. I am not one of those who was a specialist in cottage industries. The business people used to say, you are telling us not to divest. What will happen to our families tomorrow? Montek Singh Ahluwalia used to say, today it has economic value. 5 years later it will have scrap value. Sell it today. Because they wanted to get foreign investment through M&A route. This was the simplest option of the government of India in the 90s. Enron came into India. The Swadeshi Jagran Manch came out with a 147 expose on Enron. Enron's work in India, outside India, how they had doubled their cost in this country, bribed their way through. The US realized about Enron 10 years later. Why I am pointing it out is the pressure on India, Indian business, Indian people. And because it was virtually considered a defeated race, a race without any hope, the Indian diaspora won't identify with it. In fact, my mind goes back to recall the remarks made by Tara Sinha as to how she is an advertisement executive of global standing, and she used to travel throughout the world. Being a woman brought up in the traditions of India, she would not stay in hotels. She used to stay with the members of the Indian diaspora, with their friends, relatives, acquaintances and all. She wrote an article in the year 2001 that whenever I used to stay with the diaspora people, the way they used to abuse this country, it's a dirty country, it's a rotten country. See the dirt and the filth in that country. It's a shame to be associated with that country. This is what they used to tell her. It's not that they used to tell her only. They used to tell their neighbors, they used to tell their friends, they used to tell their colleagues while taking a cup of tea or sharing a dinner or over lunch or traveling together in commutation. And it is not one or two people. Some 20 million people demeaning and deriding India day in and day out like this. Rebranding India. See the pressure on this civilization. No civilization would have been so badly besmirched by its own children. And Tara Sinha said, surprisingly all this changed on one day. You know what was the day? The day on which India exploded the Pokhran atom bomb. I know the civil servant said this country has been destroyed by the Vajpayee government. This was the remark. We are finished. We are insolvent. But see, once the pride was aroused, the very Indian diaspora which demeaned and derided and devalued and debranded India came to contribute $5 billion to the India development bonds. The per capita income of India did not undergo a change on that one day. The dirt in India remained the same. The filth in India remained the same. What changed? The power of India echoed in the mind of the people who till the other day were refusing to repose faith in this civilization and the country. It proved to be the turning point, because the way others began perceiving India turned, and so we began perceiving ourselves differently because we only echo others' opinion even about ourselves. That is how India began to acquire a new image. The entire Western power said we will crush India. Who are these people to explode an atom bomb? Sanctions. As Abdul Kalam said, I want these sanctions to continue for some more time because our scientists will develop their own competence. In fact, the DRDO officials used to meet me. Mr. Gurumurthy, please ensure that we don't reopen our scientific contacts with the foreigners just now. We need 3 more years. Every scientific establishment in India used to say, give us 3 years time, 4 years time. This is the first time we are being respected in our country. These are facts. A nation under siege getting released. A nation getting defreezed. The frozen mind getting defreezed. As if a person arrested and kept for life, without light, being suddenly let into the street. This was the release that India, in spite of all the economic pressure, the entire world, I can understand a country like America doing it. But an important country like Japan imposing sanctions on India, a country which does not have an army of its own, and its defense expenditure is second only to that of the United States, because it issues checks to the United States to protect itself. And Japan said, no, we will have sanctions against you. India had the political temerity to say, hell with you, and see how that India has arisen on the global scene. A confident India turned into performing India. In fact, this is one of the debates which constantly engages. This is I have to be alert, holding AK-47 in both the hands, because this is a debate in which we are cornered every time. How did India develop into a confident nation? How did India has begun to be perceived as a potential superpower? What is it that makes the whole world look at India and China? You want to know the reason? You must go back to the reason why America looked at China in 1970. China was slumped at that day. China was a failed economy, a failed country. You know why Nixon went and sent his secret ambassador, Kissinger. Kissinger went in the dead of night, landed without the entire American establishment knowing where he was going, and he was made to wait for 36 hours before Chou Enlai gave him an appointment. You know why? If China did not have the atomic weapon, America would never have done it. It is power that is respected, because we are living in a world of rogues. A benevolent nation, a noble civilization is not going to attract attention unless it is a powerful civilization as well. India was a noble country. We had the potential to become a nuclear power in 1965-66. Even when Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister. But we decided not to. Because we thought that if a country which stood for peace all its life, if it turns to a weaponizing country, it will promote race, weapon race. This was a noble idea that drove. India wanted to project a peaceful model for the world. India wanted to emerge as the leader of a peace-loving world, a peaceable world. It was dismissed and thrown in the dustbin. So when India announced its surrender, from that day till today, it may have been struggle. There have been trials and tribulations. There have been ups and downs. But the entire world perceives India as a rising power and perhaps a superpower. Not in the 22nd century, not just in the 21st century, not in the middle of the 21st century, but in the very early part of the 20th century. This is not the perception about India. It is not India imagineering about itself. It is not India claiming a status. It is a status that is being conferred on India by the best think tanks of the world. And they are not necessarily friends of India. Many of them would not like India to come up. It is a grudging admission of the fact that this civilization is rising. How far this has been internalized in India? There is a partial understanding of it in India. Even the secular India, which is an un-Indian India, partly anti-Indian India, that also understands this fact that India is on the rise. They have to own this fact. They cannot neglect this fact, because somewhere when they come with the Indian passport, they are seen with a favorable eye. As I am telling this, my mind goes back to 1986 when I landed at the Heathrow airport. With a return ticket in British Airways to go back the next day. My client was waiting to receive me there. When I went to the immigration counter, he asked me, Mr. Gurumurthy, why are you coming into this country? I said, sir, I have come for a business consultation. And if you want, I can show the mandate letter from my client. I have come for a consultation. Standing there, you can see. Okay, different people come from your country, but they don't go back. So what's the guarantee you will go back? I told him, I have a return ticket. If you want, you can see it. Okay, you can come with the return ticket, cancel and keep it. I told him, I give you a guarantee. I am going back now. You please prepone this ticket and give it to me so that I can leave by this evening, British Airways flight. He was shocked. I said, we are from a civilization which welcomes a stranger. We worship a stranger because he doesn't know our country. I have never seen a barbaric civilization which turns away a man who wants to come into your country only for a visit. I don't want to enter a country which doesn't welcome me. He didn't know how to handle me. Of course, his superiors came, and afterwards he will tender apology and all that. Of course, some kind of apology was worked out, and then I went inside. This was the first time I was exposed to the might of a power which just trivialized and trashed us. And the problem is we accept the treatment. I can understand you are compelled to accept a treatment of a kind which you will never come to terms. But at least mentally you should be protesting. You should be angry inside. Somehow I have been let inside. If this is the kind of relief this civilization is going to have, as it always used to have, you can understand the extent to which this thousands of year old civilization of rishis and saints, of great people who profess noble ideas for not only their country but for the whole humanity, how we have trivialized and trashed them. And that is the India which on any analysis today, there are different kinds of analysis. On one analysis, India and China will lead. On another analysis, India, China, Brazil and Russia will lead. In another analysis, America and India will lead. In no analysis, India is absent. In fact, we just look at a shopkeeper, a hawker, a vegetable vendor as very ordinary people. You know how the world looks at them? They are looked at as entrepreneurs. They don't apply for jobs. If you look at the unemployment profile of India, I made a study of it. To say I is wrong, we made a study of it. Out of the total unemployed population, people who have studied less than 5th standard, there is no unemployment in India. Between 5th and 8th standard, 1% unemployment. Between 8th and 12th standard, 3% unemployment. And beyond 12th standard, there is a 7% unemployment. So you produce unemployable education. The ordinary people of India never demanded employment. In fact, the government of India came out with an assessment in the year 2002, October. A study of the unregistered business, trade, industrial undertakings in India, which are not registered in the Shop Establishments Act, whatever your factory sector, whatever. The government of India was shocked to find there were 35 million such entities providing jobs for 85 million people. You can't find the entire multinational force of America being able to do it. And more interesting information, they analyze the capital side of it. Who finances this trade? 2% capital came from government sources. 16% capital came from organized sources. 82% of the capital came from community sources. This is the underlying economic strength of India. It is an economic pyramid. And in the pyramid, because many people do not understand India's economic model, corporate sector's role in India can be gathered from the fact that the total contribution by the corporate sector to the Indian GDP is 13%, period. The government contributes 21%, public sector and everything put together. Agriculture contributes 24%. 38-39% comes from non-corporate sector. That is the largest employer, the largest saver, the largest consumer, and the least damage to environment comes from the non-corporate sector. India is a rainbow economy. Indian financial system is rainbow. Trading system is rainbow. You don't know which segment begins where and which segment ends where. Just as you do not know which color of the rainbow ends when, where, and which color of the rainbow begins afterwards. It's a rainbow country. It cannot be understood by a Harvard-educated economist. The business modeling done outside India has nothing to do with the bearings of India. The Indian model is very different. And we have been making a very keen study of India because we are pained by the fact that India is unraveled to Indians themselves. And we came to the conclusion that there is a feminine orientation to the Indian economy. The Indian economy is not masculine in character. And if you look at the expenditure-driven economies, they are largely masculine in character. And all the family-oriented economies have a feminine character. Whether it is Japan, China, Taiwan, Korea, India, Malaysia. These are all countries where there is a feminine dimension to life itself. That is why it is a non-aggressive civilization. And to understand this, you have to see how global economy is broadly divided into two categories. It is no more a case of perception, it is a case of research. It is a case of almost empirical proof. Francis Fukuyama wrote a book by the name Trust. In fact, after he wrote the original book, End of History and Lost Man, the whole world celebrated it because it had approved the Western model of not only economy, but also society, but also politics. And Fukuyama said, time has come to close down the entire history department because history deals with conflicts. Hereafter there is going to be no conflict. The world is going to be free of conflicts. It's all peace and peace and peace. Shanti, shanti, shanti. This is what he said. And the entire globalization program, the WTO, the different global treaties, and the fashioning of the American and the Western approach to the global world is going to be universalized on this basis. See how short-sighted, how short-circuited the approach is. And within 4 years he came out with another book. The first was imagineering, the second was realistic. Then he came to the conclusion that there is something called social capital. And that social capital begins with family, expands into community, and between the state and the individual there are intermediary institutions which are not formed by government or law, which are evolutions of culture, tradition, living models of people. And he said these societies have a very different life model, but he only went up to a particular point and said these family-based models do not create large corporations, only individualism-based models do. And so, individualism-based models are superior in terms of economic competition. This was his theory, but a very large point was missed in it. And the entire West is now debating about where it is going, which I will deal with it immediately. Economics of any nation has to be based on its civilization. This is not my theoretical formulation, this is my practical finding. You look at America, where from an America which provided money to the whole world in 1977, it was the greatest lending nation to the world. In 2005, it has become the most borrowed nation in the world. Today America is borrowing at the rate of $600 billion a year. It borrows approximately 8 to 10,000 crores a day. Why? Americans have stopped saving. And the American saving is largely the appreciation of their homes. So the entire America feels very wealthy because the houses in which they are living have doubled in value. There is no financial saving in America. In fact, 10 years back when we were pointing out that here is an economy which is driven by consumption and expenditure and it doesn't have savings, the American economists used to say, what does it matter? We are a powerful economy, we are an innovative economy, we are scientifically progressing and we will unravel the world through, overall the world through science and technology. Money doesn't matter. There are people who save inefficiently and they will lend money to us. This was the approach, a very serious approach. It is not one of those casual answers. There is nothing wrong in borrowing money. Not only for the government, the consumer also. There is the consumer in America who has transformed himself from paper currency to plastic currency. They are indebted to the extent of $2 trillion. And America is borrowing 70% of global savings today. And if any country can't survive without foreign investment, it is America. And look at India. You know what is going to be the savings this year of India? 9 lakh crores, equal to $200 billion, equal to 28% of our GDP. Indian economy is oriented to savings. It's not just Indian economy. It's not a different economy from the community of the nations to which culturally it belongs. Attitude He came from India and Paul Krugman accepted him as his guru. One of the finest minds. So Dr. Manmohan Singh, when he was in splits about how to handle the Indian economy, he invited him in 1993 and asked him, Dr. Bhagwati, please tell me how to fix India, how to go about handling India. Then he gave a 62-page paper advice to the government of India, which you can look at even on the website even today. In that, he gave in 3 pages his opinion about the Indian family savings. He said the biggest problem of India is India is saving excessively and wastefully. And if you want to develop, if you want to expedite your process and put the economy on the faster track, you must persuade the Indians to spend. How to persuade the Indians to spend? Isn't the problem is with the Indian women? So you get the best foreign goods, cosmetics, saris, and put them on display in all malls. Construct malls and ask women to come and buy them. Entice them. Very serious advice given. It's not fun, it's not joke. And so the government of India found the advice in a different way. In fact, Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati said, cut all the tariff barriers, bring down the tariff barriers, flood the Indian market. The government of India began doing, and we began protesting, but still the government of India was able to do. A very large amount of foreign goods came to India, foreign consumer MNCs came into India and began advertising and trying to sell to the Indian housewife. And you know the Indian housewife, she saw the advertisement, sang the advertisement songs, but did not buy the goods. And many people say when India takes to this globalization paradigm, all the diseases that are afflicting the Western societies will afflict India. You know what was the increase in savings rate in India last year? 26% was the maximum as achieved in the year 1996. Then it came down to 23%, 24%. Last year, 2004, it was 28%. And how the homogeneous Western model, which universalizes its life approach to the whole world, how they try to handle Japan. Because all of us are intelligent people and we are now obsessed with the idea of economics without basically understanding the difference between one society and another. And we also tend to think like Americans when we think about ourselves without following any of the prescriptions of the American ways of life. As I said, Japan has a $10 trillion bank savings. So when Japanese economy suddenly began to dip in 1990-91 and there was a huge erosion in the yen value, Japan was shocked because Japanese economy was rising like this. And people like Lester Turo, who had studied the Japanese society and wrote books called Head to Head and all that, they came to the conclusion that by about the middle or later half of 1990s, Japan would overtake America. I will not go into the financial mechanism by which the Japanese economy was downed by the American financial system, which is a story in itself. I don't want to get into it for a moment because it is a topic in itself. It will take me back to 1970 when the character of IMF was changed and fixed currencies were turned into floating currencies. I don't want to get into them because it's a very critical subject. But I will confine myself to the simple fact how the Americans and Western economic institutions began handling Japan. And when Japanese government did not know how to get going, they said the simplest way is see how we are growing, we are spending. You are not growing because you are not spending. So you must spend. Your government must spend. See, our government is spending. See, we have borrowed money from the Arab people and put up all these huge roads, flyovers. You must do the same thing. When you spend, money goes to the people. And people get money, they spend. When they spend, your sales increases. When the sales increases, production increases. Production increases, economics says employment increases. So this expenditure driven, what is called the supply side model as they call it in economics, that they began advocating to Japan. And foolishly Japanese government began following the advice and ended up putting infrastructure, 50% of which it cannot use even today. In the process, government has become one of the most borrowed governments in the world. And it had exhausted its borrowing power and development stock. They said no, only the government is spending. What about the people? The people are not spending. You must persuade the people also to spend. Then what is the mechanism to make the people spend? Encourage them to save less. So they brought down the interest rates from 5% to 4%. The Japanese did not spend. 4 to 3%? No. 3 to 2%? Never. 2 to 1%? No. They said from tomorrow onwards no interest, they would not spend. If you believe, last year the government passed a law, an order, that if you want to save, you have to pay penalty. The Japanese they are paying penalty and saving. These are two different models. There is nothing called a universal economic model. The only universal principle is nothing is universal. This is the Hindu principle. That is why we never universalized a God. We allowed we allowed people to have as many gods as possible. We ensured peace between gods. That's one great thing we did. We got them married to one another and settled their But in contrast, the single God religions are the most ferocious. It is like the single children in a family. It will not like to live with another. It will say, I am the greatest. The single God religions are the religions driving extremism and terror. We have ensured peace between thousands of gods. And I tell you, in my village where I come from, much of what I understand is because of my grounding in the traditions of India, which the atmosphere of the village provided. And I could handle the modernity because of my grounding in tradition. So I come from a village. In fact, there was an order passed by Jayalalitha banning sacrifice of animals in temples. I opposed it and wrote an article. In that, many of my friends were upset. How could you write this? I said, what's wrong about it? I went to a house one day, I remember 20 years back, to a family, and they were doing nivedyam of the coffee to the god. Coffee being offered to God first? I said, why? In our house it doesn't happen. How can you take anything without offering to God, sir? Then I remembered what was happening in our village. In the border Kali temple, we used to go at 4 o'clock in the evening and offer harati, nariyal and banana and come back. The same Kali will tell non-vegetarian in the night at 8 o'clock. We never found anything different in that Kali. We worship her like that, others worship her like that. This is what our religion says. You image God in the way you are. You perceive Him in the way you want to live. There is nothing universal. This is the civilizational gift of India to Indians. This is the gift of our rishis. This is the gift of India to the world. So, if you look at the Indian economy, in fact many people said these small and cottage industries will be wiped out. No, this is one of the arguments which were said. I'll give you examples. There are 370 industrial clusters in India. And I have personally, along with my team, have gone to at least 27, 28 of them. We have taken about 42 industrial clusters for study. These clusters are so vibrant. I will name a few of them. Take for instance Tirupur. Tirupur is a place from where knitwear garments are exported throughout the world. And the total export this year is going to be $1.2 billion. And I am studying Tirupur for the last 8 years. When I went there, I found that the people who are farmers and they were cultivating cotton, they graduated to then they turned into cotton spinners, then they turned to textiles, and finally went into knitting. It is a gradual process, and knitting is one of the most capital intensive industries, and it has environmental standards, labor standards, social standards of global level to comply, and still they have conquered the global market. And out of 300 exporting families, 90% of them do not know English. And I was talking to our finance minister. I don't want to name him, I don't want to give the year so that you can infer who he was. He asked me, बार बार तुम तिरुपुर के बारे में बोल रहे हो, क्या हो रहा है उधर? They are putting up a stellar export performance. No capital from government, no capital from capital market, no capital from FDI. The Pennsylvania University sent a team to study them. You know why? Where is it? Some place called Tirupur. They looked at the map of India. In the map of India there is no Tirupur. Then somehow they found, oh, it comes from this place. They looked at Tamil Nadu map. In Tamil Nadu map it is one of the smallest dots. Then they found there is a nearby education center, Coimbatore. They established contact with the Coimbatore Education Center called PhD Institute of Management. And then sent a team to study how this stellar export performance in a highly high-tech area by developing country standards has been put up by them. And you know what our people did? They were very happy. Pennsylvania people are coming. Then they drove them, provided logistic, housed them, waited on them. These people made a study. And you look at the World Development Report of 2001 of the World Bank, Tirupur figures prominently in 2 pages as to how a community, an agrarian community, quote unquote an English illiterate community, has been able to master the art of beating the global market and making its business. This is not the India known to Indians first. This is not the India which Economic Times will capture. This is not the India which the Indian policy makers will project. You know which India? Then I was shocked into realizing my entire understanding of economics, the way capital gets formed, the way entrepreneurial talent takes shape, was completely wrong in the year 1992 when I went to Ludhiana. Mr. Sardar is here, he will tell you. Ludhiana imports 7 lakh labor from outside. It has established one of the best manufacturing centers, precision manufacturing centers. The hero cycle was established by the blacksmiths of Punjab called Ramgadiyas. They are born engineers. They have taken over Manchester. In Manchester there is no English industry. It belongs to the Sardars of Punjab. They have established industry. The way the Patels have established the Rajkot. When I went to Rajkot, it was the dead of night. I had a discussion from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the morning with the Rajkot Industry Association president. The only common English word which he and me knew was the word Rajkot. He was speaking in Gujarati, I was speaking in English. He was adding value to India. I was an overhead on India. I could see the difference. I traveled through India to understand India. There is no book on India because the education system is not ours. The perception is not ours. The mirror that is held before us reflected a perverted India to us. So if India is rising, it is not because of the Indian capital market. Many people look at the capital market of the country and say, oh, the country is rising. How many people know? Just 2% of the national saving alone goes into the capital market in India. Just 2% of the national saving. barometer of India. It is the enterprising communities. Actually, the global entrepreneurial report says there are 90 million entrepreneurs in India. 9 crore in the age group of 18 to 35. That is the power of India. If India is rising, it is because of them. If India is rising, the government has released its control over them. Not fully, partially. That partial lifting of control, the pressure of the government on them has released the Indian energies. India is not without problems. Every country has problems. India has its problems. It has its poverty, it has its illiteracy, it has its backwardness, it has its different geographical areas developed differently. Which country doesn't have problems? But look at America. It has problems. What kind of problems? Estimates show 30% of the pregnant are unwed school-going children. 49% of the families are single-parent families. With the result, the civilizational resources are so badly exhausted. And with the result, the entire society has become dependent on the state through the social security system. You just pay the social security tax. It is the responsibility of the government to look after yourself. You need not bother about yourself. This has completely destroyed the concept of an independent, vibrant society which looks after itself. And immediately I go back to the picture in India. A leading consultant by name Kumar Bhattacharya, who was advising Margaret Thatcher on privatization, was brought into India. Of course, I also know him as a friend because we had come in contact with each other through a corporate consultancy. And the ministers of the government of India made Dr. Bhattacharya to have a conversation with me. He said, Guru, why are you opposing this privatization? These are such a burden on the government, Air India, Indian Airlines, railways, all these must be privatized. He said, Kumar, I agree with you. There is a very large part of the Indian public sector needs to be privatized, but we can have disagreement on the model of doing it, the areas of doing it, the calibration of doing it. On all these I will have different opinion with you. But can I ask you a question, which is the most privatized economy in the world? He said, I can't get you. I asked him, which is the biggest public burden on the government, on the burden on the governments in the West? He said, Social Security. I asked him, can you ever privatize it? People do not know the extent of danger. At least America is, maybe it will be able to overcome if it has a strong political leadership, and if it will be able to overcome tremendous amount of voter anger, I don't know. But in Scandinavian countries it's all over. You know, in Sweden, 75% of the men and women live together, anybody with any length of time. With the result, as many children born do not know the name of the father, much less the grandfather. With the result, this is only half the story. With the result, the government passed a law in July 2003, that anyone above the age of 58 can appoint a clerk to look after himself, and the government will pay for the clerk. It's part of the social security. Erosion of the civilizational base of the society. And I told Kumar, the entire social security burden is privatized in India, not because of any government order, it is because of the age-old principles of Dharma. To no child, his father or mother is an economic issue or an economic problem. To no father, a son is an economic problem. There are many fathers who borrow lakhs and lakhs of rupees to educate their sons. You know why? They are their sons. It is a continuity, it is a tradition. It is a culture handed over from one generation to other. Like in relay race, it is handed over. And the government can destroy it, it cannot create it. It's not I am not saying it is crime society, the government will destroy it. Because civilizations call for a trade-off between individual rights and collective rights. A family demands a certain amount of surrender from every member of the family. A locality, a community demands a certain amount of trade-off between the individuals and family's rights and the community's overseeing rights. And the community's overseeing right is a social capital. And that is why 700,000 villages in India have only 12,400 police stations. And I told all this to Kumar Bhattacharya. He told me, Guru, one aspect is articulated by the Indian intellectuals, policy makers, media, government, to the global fora. The balance sheet of the government of India will be more bankable than the balance sheet of any country in the West. This is because of the civilizational basis of India, which rests on dharma. It is easy to erode it. You can't recoup it, you can't revive it, you can't rebuild it. A disoriented mind cannot be reoriented. You have to be careful about it. It calls for vigilance. It is easy to dissipate this. You cannot aggregate it. So if India is rising, it is not because of the Western model of development. It is because of the Western tools of development assisted at the bottom, a huge pyramid on which this elite Western model rests. The global India is the cutting edge of India, but that is not India. This is our understanding of the Indian economy. That's why India, like China, and how like China? In fact, if you read the history of China, not the old history, new history, when communism had completely destroyed everything in China, their arts, music, religion, culture, their respect for elders, everything was destroyed, like Pol Pot did. Pol Pot completely destroyed everything. In fact, after Pol Pot went, the Cambodian government had to make an announcement. Does anybody know this musical instrument? Does anybody know whether this textbook is there, this book on songs is there? Whether anybody knows this aspect of culture? They had to announce for one continuous year to bring out people who were hiding and to have an assembly of all the people to revive Cambodia. Very rarely it happened in China, because China was too big, it could not be done. The entire cultural revolution was to destroy all this. Now what is the finding? If anything survived the communist onslaught completely and went underground, it was the Confucian family model and respect for elders. That is the soul of China. And it is built on a psychology which has been derived, which has been internalized, made part of the DNA for thousands of years. In fact, a question was addressed to Confucius by the Chinese king. You always keep talking about respect for elders, respect for family. But what about me? I am the king. He said, you are the king, you may not be there tomorrow, your affair may not be there, but the family will be there. That's a more durable institution, and so I will not allow you to do anything which affects the family. Then the king put a question. Let us assume a father commits a murder in front of the son. Should the son come and not report to me? He said, no, he will not report to you. Confucius gave this answer. Then, if my independent police arrest the father and calls the son for witness, in the court should he come and tell a lie? Yes, he should come and tell a lie. It's a very extreme example. But the fact remains, that showed the extent to which China accepted the Confucian model. And that is what stands by China today. That is its civilization, let's say, not communism. Not the public sector undertaking. That is why the Chinese saving rate is 40% of their GDP. what is taught in Harvard? Is it what is taught in textbooks? In fact, I asked the Indian economist, you are teaching economics, is there a word called family in Indian economics textbooks? He said no. You know why there is no word called family? There is no such word in the textbooks printed in America and elsewhere. And you reprint the same in India, how will you find the word family? So there is a very different economic model, social model, cultural model founded on the civilizational assets of India. And unless we realize it, we understand it, we package it and present it to the world, today a situation has come, the West is completely shattered as to how to proceed because they know they can't proceed in the same manner. They know they can't but proceed in the same manner. A civilizational orientation of the West is needed. This is what Swami Vivekananda said when he said India has to export spirituality and dharma to the West. And this is the delivery mechanism which can do it. It cannot be done by PowerPoint presentation. Any life model has to be delivered as a living model. Here is the example how the society lives. Intelligent people, capable people, they are not tribals, living in distant forests without electricity. They are like you, they can handle technology. See how they live. This living model has to be given to the world, otherwise the world will be unworthy of living. I can assure you. That is why the Indian century is necessary for the world. And India has a duty to the world. This was conceived by Swami Vivekananda, perceived by Maharishi Aurobindo. For decades the Hindu movements in India have been working for this, waiting for this occasion when the world's attention would be drawn to India. Today it is drawn. Attention is not only drawn, the eye is on India. The world does not take its eye off India. It is not that it is attracted to India, it is distracted by India. You can understand how vigilant we have to be. And the Indian diaspora here has a tremendous responsibility. It has to realize its newfound status. Recognition it has got. It has to internalize that pride without exhibiting it. It has to relate to the rising India. And it must be the representative of that rising India. And the way he was disowning India, running away from India, that has to cease. It has to identify with that India. Otherwise we will become cultural orphans, cultural refugees. It has happened to many civilizations. No one individual can protect civilization. Civilization is a collective asset. Social capital is a collective asset. Many sociologists and economists agree today. Your money belongs to you. It is in your pocket. It is in your bank account. It is in the shares in your name. Your intellectual property belongs to you. It is in your degrees. It is in your assignment. It is in your profile. But social capital, which is the collective virtue of the people, is not owned by anybody. It is owned by only the collective, linked by culture and civilization, tradition, a certain living model. This can be disturbed, but it cannot be regrouped. That is why we have to identify and retain our identity, relate to the mother society, deliver this message to the world, and time has come when the West will look to India, not because India's GDP is rising, or India's economy is on the rise, or because India is a military power, but because India has an alternative life model to give. And the Indian community in America is the critical delivery mechanism of this message. You have to articulate this comprehensively. It's not that we are trying to sell our culture. We don't want to replace your gods. Keep the cross. We don't want the Trishul. Trishul to replace the cross. So there is some amount of proximity between the two. We want you to understand life in the way for thousands of years we have understood, and that is why our civilization is undated. It is continuing even today. And Swami Vivekananda said, if Vedavyasa come and walked through the streets of India, he will find some of the old constructions even today. Present this model, present this vision. It cannot be done by individuals. Performances can be that of individuals. But collectivization of our energy, our identity, our efforts, networking. Share it with the Indian groups. Then they will understand what it is. A lion which had moved among the cub which had moved among the sheep, it never recognized it was a lion. And finally, it was shown by its mother, see, this is what you want. You have to show to the Indian groups, spiritual groups, social groups, present to the mirror, to the look at yourself, this is what you want. And then the delivery mechanism will shake up, and that is the initiative which Dr. Manohar Shinde and the co-workers are taking to constitute a global Dharma foundation, to pool our energies, our identities, network them together. None of us need to lose our identities. Network it. Do research. And without trivializing their present position, without criticizing them, you say that this model has worked so far. This model is likely to work hereafter. And this is how we have to present ourselves to the world, not in our interest only, but in the interest of the world also. There are many things, more things to be said, but I suppose an outline of this kind would have had the effect of presenting before you something which is worthy of contemplation. And if I have succeeded in triggering you and touching your mind with this presentation, I would consider this evening's talk a success. Thank you very much.
Gurumurthy, धन्यवाद for such an enlightening talk, which I am sure for all of us, it will make us feel more prouder about Bharat, which is our karma bhumi, punya bhumi, and our dharma bhumi. In the lack of time and time day that Gurumurthy had today, we will skip the question and answer session. And I want to know, there's one small announcement. Some of you may be knowing that Gigi Maji, Sadhvi Rikamaraji is in New Jersey, and tomorrow is a program. If you are interested in attending, you can please contact Chair of Surgery. We can close the program with Shanti Mantra.
Only one thing. My friend reminded me of the concluding part, which as part of the overall message I have been giving in different places. I'm very sorry to say, because I thought I had overreached my time and didn't say this. He reminded me to say this. There was pitch darkness in the country after the revolutionaries were completely destroyed in India, and Aurobindo had to go to Pondicherry, Maharishi Aurobindo. He saw no hope of reviving India. This total darkness. So Aurobindo was sent abroad by his father, so that he didn't want him to be brought up as an Indian at all. He should not know about India. He must forget he was an Indian. Such a person came back to India, turned a revolutionary, and came to Pondicherry. And he began looking at a mad mystic called Kulacham. Those who are Tamilians here will know that poet Subramanya Bharati has written poems on this mad saint. And Aurobindo's colleagues were stunned at Aurobindo's transformation, that maybe Aurobindo has become mad because he is looking at a madman for guidance. But Aurobindo said, he will lead me, he will guide me. 2 months passed, 3 months passed, 6 months passed, 8 months passed, 9 months passed. One day Aurobindo was sitting along with his colleagues and taking a cup of tea in the morning on the seashore. Kulachami came and lifted the teacup in front of Aurobindo and showed it to him. It was full. He emptied it and showed it to him and kept it and left. Aurobindo was in ecstasy, but his colleagues were worried tea is lost. Aurobindo said, I have got his guidance. What have you got? You have lost the tea. He has asked me to empty my mind and begin thinking afresh. That was the message Aurobindo got, which led him to do the entire national building, intellectual, yogic work which Aurobindo did, was out of this symbolic message given by Kulachami. And that is my advice and request and pleading to all of you.
I think Gurumurthy, they started early morning